100%, 100%, 100%. In fact, all of the seeds I sowed last month have germinated. All of them except this one here. You pesky little... Well, I remember when I took up gardening, there was nothing more discouraging than expensive seeds vanishing in compost that only went mouldy and only having a handful of plants to show for all that hard work. But before you even consider blaming yourself or your technique, have you made sure that you're using the right soil? To get germination like that, I have one trick, this seed starting mix. I use it for almost every seed that I sow, and you can make it at home with just 3 ingredients. I've been growing food from seed for a fair few years now, and I remember vividly in my first year growing absolutely everything into a multi-purpose compost that comes in a green and yellow bag. And if you're going to use a heavy and stodgy compost like that, then you run the risk of seeds rotting, plants' roots rotting, or even mould issues. Which is exactly what happened to me. I had terrible germination in that first year. My seeds vanished in the soil. And in the end, I decided to leave the pots outside overnight in the freezing cold because I didn't want all that fluffy mould in my house anyway. That kind of compost is just too thick to sow seeds into because it drains so poorly. I never did enjoy a peat compost. So the first step in getting good germination is to find yourself a good seed starting mix. I've been using Rocket Grow for a few years now, and it feels like a loose and grainy clay. If you can't get yourself a discount, it does sit a little bit on the premium end of things, but it forms the first ingredient in our seed starting mix. Rocket Grow claim really high germination, and I think it's pretty darn good. However, it does retain a lot of water. Peat lovers, that will be music to your ears. But it does also mean that you can add too much water, and then if you mishandle it and squish it into some kind of clump, a bit like this, then that's less good for sowing seeds into. And if your house has problems with airflow, then you're still going to end up with things like surface mould. So while this stuff is really good at improving germination rates and will beat a general purpose, multi-purpose compost, I think we can do one better by adding another ingredient. The next ingredient is sterile, so it's a great way of eliminating those mould issues. It's also relatively cheap, which makes it great for bulking out your compost and making your money go that little bit further. If you haven't guessed yet, I'm talking about coconut coir, which is a waste material that's transported in a dehydrated and compressed state, which makes it somewhat environmentally friendly compared to the alternatives, although I'm fairly sure someone in the comments will disagree with that statement. But the best thing about coir is that it's light, fluffy, and retains water without ever really getting waterlogged or compacting. So plants get access to water while still getting good airflow around the roots, minimizing the risk of root rot. And if you make a mistake by overwatering, then this will dry out much faster and you'll return to a good state much quicker than you would with a seed compost, but without needing to constantly water. It's basically the Goldilocks material for seed starting. You could mindlessly sow your seeds into this and get great germination rates. But there aren't many accessible nutrients in here, so you'd need to transplant them a lot earlier, very shortly after germination, and that's more work than I'd like. Which is why we're going to mix the coir with the compost and try and find a happy medium, where the seeds aren't too wet and they aren't starved of nutrients either. We basically want to reduce the density of the compost, allow more airflow, provide better drainage and become a lighter texture, and then use that to start our seeds. I use coconut coir from Coir & Co, which is meant to be carbon neutral but is certified for use in organic growing, and they come in these little bricks or these very economical giant slabs. But before we go on to make the mix, there is one more ingredient that we need to talk about. The last ingredient is kind of strange, and it's the only inorganic item on my list. I'm not sure you can certify a pebble. It's an inert volcanic rock called Perlite, which we add to our soils to improve drainage and to provide little air pockets. That means the roots never get completely waterlogged and can breathe. It also means the soil clears water that little bit quicker, which gives us better control over moisture levels. And it's also permeable to light, which means light can get that little bit deeper into the soil. A lot of plants don't need perlite at all to grow well. In fact, you could probably do without it. This is just my secret sauce to help the roots stay healthy. But you might want to add it if you have plants that need well-draining soils, or to help your young seedlings that are grown indoors. But you could add things like sand. Cacti, succulents and crops like samphire will really enjoy that. Or you could use degradable materials like rice hulls to improve drainage. Or you could go the other way entirely and add something like vermiculite, which retains water and hangs on to nutrients, but it is pretty weird stuff. So to make my seed starting mix, I add boiling water to the coconut coir to rehydrate it, and then weigh out equal volumes of coir and compost. And then I mix them together really well, and then add the same volume of dry perlite and mix that in too. Perlite can be very, very dusty, so be sure to use it in a ventilated space or to wet it beforehand. Or use a mask. So that's a 1:1:1 ratio of the three components by volume, which works out to be this ratio when measured by weight. It might not be optimal, but it is a super simple recipe that I use for all of my seeds. So I'll fill my pots with this mix, sow the seeds into the surface, and then cover with more coir. And that will get me super high germination, doesn't produce any mould or rotting issues, and is foolproof enough that even this guy can grow healthy plants. I'll cover the tray with something to trap humidity, place the seeds somewhere warm to help them germinate, and then as soon as I see the baby seedlings, I'll put them somewhere bright so that they don't go leggy. In my first 3 years, I just used natural light and had great results. But I found I got better results when placing them under lights. However, I was a little bit worried about the quality of these cheap lights that I bought online. So I ran an experiment to find out if they were bright enough to grow tomato seedlings, and I published the results in this video here. However, it turns out it's not just the soil that affects germination, it's also the variety. With this variety here germinating ahead of the rest and growing strongest under lights. So for those of you who want to give your plants the very best head start, I'll see you up there. Otherwise, as always, happy gardening.